I don't remember not making movies. I guess that's where. It started a long time ago when I was 10 years old. My dad had bought a video camera and gave it to me, or I took it from him actually. And I think I just have been making movies ever since. And I've done a lot of film school. I went to NYU for undergrad and the American Film Institute in LA for graduate school. And this is my first feature, but I don't feel like it is because I've been sort of making films for my whole life pretty much.
I had a little more circuitous route. I started out in theater in school, and then I became interested in dance, and I trained for many years in Kathak, which is a very, obviously, storytelling-based form of dance. So I came to it through live performance, and I've always just loved storytelling in all its different forms. And then eventually I was living in India, training in dance, and this is the sort of capital of filmmaking in the world, so I naturally got interested in films. And then I moved back. I was living in India dancing. I decided to move back to LA for film school. So I went to the American Film Institute as well, and that's how.
No, I think film school is really important. Well, for me it was. And I think a big part of film school is the network of people that you work with. For instance, we obviously met in film school, but our producer was also in our class, same with our production designer, cinematographer. So I think it's just the network of people that you work with. And of course, that's all you're doing. You're just making movies and you get to fail and fall on your face and then get back up and try again. So I think I think you can make movies outside. You don't have to go to film school at all. Anyone can be a filmmaker. But I think in lots of ways, film schools help you learn about the process, learn about the craft, and then meet the people that you're going to work with later. So I think it's a great place.
I think that's the most important thing that you get out of film school. You do get to learn a lot about the craft, but you really get to practice, depending on the program, actually executing and working with a team of people. And I think that that has a lot of value to it. I don't think that it's necessary for everyone. It's a really case-by-case basis. It depends on the person. But I think besides film school, I think life experience is essential because you're a storyteller. So having a perspective, having exposure to different things, that's a really important part of being a filmmaker. Well, cinema, it's like a sort of coming together of all the different art forms. You have music, you have acting, you have photography. So it's a wonderful way of bringing together all the different art forms. And what I really love about filmmaking is that it is collaborative. So it's not it's not a solitary exercise. It's a way of sort of coming up with a vision and then working with other people to sort of, achieve it, but also, to allow them to contribute to it and make it better than maybe you would have thought of. So that's something that really inspires me. I love to be inspired by other people and other people's creativity. So that's why films are awesome.
Well, the title, it just relates actually to the characters are Indian, so that's sort of the Brahmin of it. And also the father, he comes from Boston, so it's a sort of play on words of Boston Brahmin, sort of an aristocratic character who Roshan Seth plays in the movie. And then the Bulls just relates to the father and son who are sort of at odds with one another, and so they're sort of struggling with each other. That's basically the general idea of it. It's a good question. I guess, it's a subject that I'm still very interested in, and a relationship that I'm always really interested in. And I think in this particular movie, what we tried to do, or what we talked about when we were writing it and working on it, was it's that moment in time when you're growing up and you start to realize that your parents are individuals, and that they were once individuals before you, and that they had their own hopes and dreams and all those things. And I think we wanted to kind of explore that transition, or that moment when you realize that about your parents. So I don't know, as far as like why this should be a feature film, it was a relationship we were interested in, and we wanted to explore it, and we just started writing it. I don't think we had there was no calculated thing about it. to be very honest, feature films are their own beast in and of themselves. I made a lot of short films, and what the difference, I think, the big difference between a short film and a feature film is, in a short film, you might be shooting for 4 or 6 days, but you know the story that you're telling, and you know whenever you're in a scene, you know the entirety of that story. So it's much easier to find yourself when you're directing. But in a feature, the difference is, on a 20-day shoot, you're shooting one scene, you're shooting out of order. It's a much more difficult process to remember and find where you are in that script. And I think the big thing for me was that I had to really trust the script and trust the people around me. And you know that you work on this scene and make it as good as you can. And in the editing room is when you start to put everything together. But you just have to have a lot of faith and trust that you're telling a story that makes sense, and that's from the script. So.
I think the other thing is you really have to know your script very, very well. And that's a lot harder with a feature than it is with a short, because regardless, no matter how well planned you are, and it's very important to be very well planned, when you're doing a feature, you will lose shots, you will lose even scenes, you'll lose time, you'll lose daylight, and you're always needing to adapt to the moment. And so that's what makes it especially hard when you lose, let's say, what you thought was a critical scene. How can you, during production itself, find an opportunity to make up for that? Maybe by improvising something. So really knowing your story is important when you're in that situation.
And I think that, same thing with shorts too, but on a feature, I think the big thing is to always be very aware, because I think, we change things a lot, whether it was the script or just we would add scenes at the last minute, and you get a sense or get a feeling that I think this is what the story needs. And I think it's hard to talk about, but I think that's the thing that you start to learn as you make more and more things, just to be very present and to be very aware, and just try to listen to the story, I guess, while you're directing.
Organically, really. When you come up with a character, it's coming up with all the various facets of that character. So it could be a backstory, but it could also be, what are the challenges he's facing in his life with his relationships? But a lot of the times, the challenges you face in your life are actually emanating from within you. They're because of some mindset, some condition, some sort of state of being that character is actually in at that moment. So, for example, in this case with the cat became a metaphor for a sort of coming of age. The cat became a symbol of, sort of learning to be able to care for someone else or something else outside of oneself, especially in a difficult time, and that can be very healing. So yeah, it wasn't something that we came up with in a calculated way. It's just very organic. Yeah.
I think we always talk about this, about what is universal, and I think we try to find what's actually really specific. And I think that in specificity, you actually can get to something that's universal. So for us, in this story, it was drawing from some personal experiences and using some personal relationships. I constantly keep going back to father-son stories. I love my father. We have a great relationship, but at the same time, it's a relationship that I find really fascinating, and so I always want to explore that in the movies that I make. So I think with this movie, we just wanted to try to find something authentic and real, and we were looking for that specificity. So I guess to answer your question, as far as thematically, and we don't think about themes up front. I think we try to think of story and character first, and then theme can come from that. So that's what we were looking for. What was specific, what was real and authentic, and then hopefully that becomes universal, if that makes sense.
We actually, because we ran out of time, we had to lose a scene at the end of a sequence that I thought was extremely important, and so I started actually looking around. Even though we had moved on from that location, I was circling locations we were at, on subsequent days, looking for a parking lot, because we needed a parking lot anywhere, and I just wanted to find another day to put that scene, and we just couldn't find it. And in the end, we just changed the setting completely, the scene completely, but the idea was the same. And we were able to, with the actors, improvise something that had the entire set in splits, laughing. It was great. So, yeah. Sometimes it's just the unexpected things that come up on the fly and the way everyone bands together to cope with that. That's the fun part.
I mean, everyone says, I think, with making movies, but it's, you have all these limitations, and as long as you embrace them, you know them, you'll figure creative ways to get around problems. And I think if everyone's on the same page, and that's generally the case on movies, you start to form a camaraderie, then you'll make it through always, and you come up with something better than what you started with.
I mean, limitation is a source of creativity.
Yeah.
I think it's important to think that way.
It's always hard. I mean, making movies is tough, and I think for us, raising money, we tried so many ways to raise money, but in the end, it came down to the people that really wanted to invest in us. And so we started with a budget that was, modest, but we weren't able to raise that amount, so that we ended up shooting for something much less than that, and we had to find a way to still make it the way that we wanted to make it for the budget and the money that we ended up having. It's hard, but you end up doing it. It's just meeting people who are on the business side of filmmaking, and you realize as you make movies, like that's such. I mean, obviously it's obvious, but as filmmakers, we don't think about the end result. We don't think about that when you're starting to make a movie, when you're writing a script, or when you're directing. It's like, but at the end of the day, people need to see the movie, or you want to get your movie out, and so the market really helps, just in terms of even a learning process of learning who these sales agents are and what the industry is like. So it's been really great, actually.
It's difficult because we are filmmakers, so that's the work that we do, and we feel confident in doing that work. But it doesn't end there, because making a film, that process isn't finished until it actually reaches an audience. So, but the art can't exist without the commerce, and the commerce can't exist without the art. We both need to know a little bit about the other side of things. So, the MART gives like sort of a nice forum for the two to mix. So that's great.
Well, I mean, it's really wonderful. This is our international premiere, and to be screening with all these amazing films, it's actually an honor. I think what I get most excited about is just seeing what audience reactions are to the movie, because this is an American film, but we're screening in Bombay, and we always wonder, like, does the film translate? Does it work? And after our first screening, we were actually really pleasantly surprised, because it did in lots of ways. So I think that's the biggest thing. I'm just really excited to play for an Indian audience and to watch that reaction and see how people perceive it.
Well, we've already had a chance to meet a lot of really great, interesting people, and that's always what's fun about a festival. Great filmmakers, people who are working in all different departments of the industry, so that's always fun. I think there's a great energy here in Mumbai. I mean, I've lived here at a very formative time in my life, so what they say about Bombay is true. You can leave, but it never leaves you. So this is sort of like coming home for me, and it's great to be here with a film, and just get to see how the industry has changed over the last decade. I think it's really exciting. I think this is an exciting place to make movies, and that's fun. It's fun. So.